I was the biggest skeptic that you could even imagine. And anytime any chiropractor spoke about energy or the intelligence in the body or the body having a wisdom, I would just roll my eyes. And I worked with all the orthopedic surgeons and neurologists. I was helping a lot of people with pain and with headaches. They were coming back with, really similar things after 2, 3, 4 months. And I said to a friend, I'm like, is this all we're doing? So he actually dragged me to Paris. You need to meet this guy because he's doing something different. And I went to this seminar in Paris. And so when I got there, they were speaking about the energy in the body and waves and flow, and a lot of the time I was rolling my eyes. And he was quite clever. He pulled me on the table and he made a really, really gentle contact. It was that contact that really changed my life, because what happened was, with this gentle contact, this rush of energy came through my body and tears happened straight away. And I didn't really know what had happened. I didn't really know how to explain it. For me, that was the one contact that really made me start to think of this persona that I had as this science-only person. That was really clear for me that inside our bodies, inside our spine and inside our nervous system, we hold physical, chemical and emotional stress. And I know that my body was holding stress. My body was obviously holding a lot of emotional stress that was ready to come out. And that's what happens for us. We have so much stress in our lives. In our lives, we have this physical stress, chemical stress and emotional stress. And if we can process it, it moves through. But the amount of stress we have now for our bodies is way too much. We can't process it. So what we're doing is we're storing it for later. And when we store stress for later, the body, the spine, says, no problem, I'll find a place for it. And what it does is it stores on one of the 7 gateways in one of the vertebrae through there. So rather than a vertebra moving like it's supposed to have, great movement, what happens is when stress is stored, there starts to be stuckness through there. And where there's stuckness through a vertebra, which I call a spinal blockage, that interferes with the nerves that need to come out too, to everything, to, the organs, the cells, the muscles, the systems of the body. And that's what stress does. And I want to share as well is that all of us have stress that's stored, because the life that we're living right now, the amount of stress in our life is incongruent for how much our bodies can handle. There's just so much stress, and that's starting to store in the gateways of the spine. And when there's stress that's stored in our bodies, what our bodies do is, they let out a signal, and sometimes that signal is pain. The body's saying, hey, I've got pain. And that doesn't mean that you're broken. That means that your body's speaking to you. There's stress in my body that I need help. I need help to find this, to release it. So I learned this so much when I worked at the Texas Back Institute, working alongside 8 orthopedic surgeons and 4 neurologists, and seeing people that came in with the worst types of pain ever. I learned so much about the body, and I learned so much about the pain signal and how that can relate a lot to sometimes what the scans are saying, but sometimes it doesn't relate to what the scans say. So at the Texas Back Institute, we prevented 85% of surgery, which was absolutely amazing. It's still always that 15% for me to go, but what happened with them? Why can't we prevent all surgeries? And what I learned there was that people's scans and people's x-rays or people's tests didn't actually relate to the symptoms that people have. And you might know that yourself. You might feel that, you get out of bed and, you don't feel great, or you've got a lot of pain and you've got no energy, and you've had every single test. You might have had every blood test, you might have had every x-ray, and people might have said to you, hey, you're doing okay. Your blood tests are fine, your x-rays are fine, there's nothing wrong with you. And I want to share with you that my journey the last 25 years working with, thousands of clients, I've seen people that have got best amazing bodies that feel great. And I've looked at their x-rays, and the x-rays showed, so much degeneration and so much arthritis, and it didn't correlate. But I've also seen the opposite, people really, really struggling with pain and with stress and, having low energy, and their scans and their x-rays looking okay. And so I want you to know that if that is you and someone said to you, hey, you're okay and you're not feeling okay, then something's missing and we need to really look at what's happening in your body. And this relates back to this guy, Peter, that came to see me, and Peter had fibromyalgia, he had depression, and he was at a stage where he was suicidal. Life was not working for him. And, when he came to see me, I could see not just one of the gateways blocked. He had a blocked gateway in his pause gateway. He had blocked gateway in his center gateway. There was so much stress in his body and he wasn't doing okay at all. It got to a stage where, he wanted to end his life. And after I started to work with Peter, what started to happen was there were less and less blockages in his spine. There was more and more flow. And, he got up off the table and I remember him saying, you know what, I'm going to be okay. I feel happier. I feel that there's more ease in my body. I feel less depressed. I've got less pain. And, that was one of the times that, really brought a tear to my eye, knowing that when there's stress that's stored in the body along one of the 7 gateways and we start to remove that stress from the body, everything changed. What changed for Peter was his fibromyalgia, was his chronic depression, and the biggest thing that changed for Peter was his willingness to be here, to stay alive, and to be in a body that was starting to feel a lot better. What I've been chasing my whole life is really understanding the body and understanding why some people get better and some people don't, or why the scans look different. And so from my journey, Spinal Flow wasn't something that I invented and went, right, here's a modality at all. Spinal Flow has been put together by a combination of the last 25 years. From me as a chiropractor, the chiropractic philosophy is beautiful. That's where I learned about the spine and the nervous system blockages, what the chiropractors call subluxations. And if there's blockages in the spine, that interferes with the messages that, the spine needs to send to. Going on to Texas Back Institute, working with the surgeons and the neurologists, I learned so much. I learned what happens when people come together. When they come together and work together on one body, massive, massive changes happen. From there, I wanted to understand more. I went into the ashram and I lived in the ashram in India, and that's where I really started to understand or be introduced to the 7 chakras. And when I was introduced to the 7 chakras, I'm like, oh wow, this stuff has been around forever. The 7 chakras explained so much of what I was seeing with my clients and in the 7 regions of the spine. And that blew me away because, for me, when there's a blockage in the heart area, which I call the center gateway, what happens is, that's where their heart is hidden or their heart is being protected, and often they'll have tears in that area. And then I realized, the same thing correlated with the chakra system and, the pelvis. I speak about the pelvis and the foundation gateway, that, the pelvis has got 2 sides. We need to move forward in life. And if one side is blocked, it means that we're trying to move forward, but something's holding us back. And that can be one of the most common causes of back pain. And then when I started to understand the chakra system, I was like, oh, it's a really similar philosophy and similar belief. But it made me really understand the spine and the nervous system at a much deeper level, because it wasn't just about bones and nerves, which is where I started with chiropractic. And in Texas at the Back Institute, it started to really make me understand the emotions underneath. And when people have got stress and it's stored at a deeper level, what does that mean? And depending on which area of the body, it means something different. So my learning has come through there, and then it has kept going. It's kept going from, when I brought my son into this world, all I wanted was a water birth and a natural water birth. And for me, that's not what happened with the birth of my son. It's like I had everything else, but it really just showed me how there are different systems in this world. And at that stage, I was so anti the medical system and I was anti-intervention, but without intervention for me, I wouldn't be alive and my son wouldn't be alive. So that really softened me as a practitioner, and it really, really made me start to believe less in what people tell me, but more into following the body, following the wisdom of my clients' bodies and learning what their body was saying and trusting that. And my belief is this path of the last 25 years is where Spinal Flow came. You know, Spinal Flow came from bringing all of this together. So it wasn't about my wisdom, it was about asking the questions and knowing that so many of these things are around in so many modalities already, in the East, in the West, and putting together all the puzzles to realize, you know what, there's something in here that makes sense in understanding and interpreting someone's body via the 7 gateways of the spine. When I look at someone's spine, why is that so related to their life and their happiness? And that's where it's at now. You know, I can look at someone's spine and know how they feel in their own body because it's so related. So Spinal Flow was built over just life experiences and learning and choosing to ask the right questions of what's going on, you know, why do some people heal, why do some people don't, and what is happening with the stress, and why is it getting stored in the spine, and why if there's a blockage here does it affect the heart, or why if there's a blockage in the lumbar spine does it affect the digestion system. So for me, that's what I've learned.